Hey everyone, and welcome to Good Morning Princeton. Steve and I are here to educate you on all things relevant and what we like to call our orange bubble. Our segment today is all about a hot topic in today's culture, news on social media. We see this almost everywhere on our electronic devices, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat to Instagram. Later in our segment, we will welcome a couple of guest appearances as they give us their insight and opinions on this popular commodity, making its rise in modern society. To start, though, my co-host Steve and I will share some of the relevant information that we have discovered through research exploration. Our first point, who are the relevant social groups for this technology? Steve, I'm going to let you tackle this one.
Alrighty, Julia, thanks. So as most people could probably guess, social media in general has continued to become more prevalent in our culture by the day. However, certain demographics are more clued into this technology and the news that is offered on social media sites than others. I mean, you and I are surrounded by social media users almost constantly throughout our day. The younger generation of Americans, ranging from young kids in elementary school to as old as students in college or young employees in the workforce, are basically on social media all day long. Social media is their main source of news. Usually it's Facebook articles or Twitter feed or the stories on Snapchat, and less common but still used are online news platforms that the younger generation can access on their phones or laptops. Now, this is way different than how adults get their news and use social media. Social media for adults is a whole different world. Most older people use social media less intensely than kids, and by that I mean they spend less time on it, check it maybe once a day or once every other day, not multiple times in an hour like a lot of kids do. Adults are rarely on Snapchat, and if they are, it's probably just to annoy their kids. Twitter has been on the rise in adults as a news platform, and Facebook is a classic example of adults on social media. More and more people of all ages are joining social media, specifically adults, to use it as a way to react to the news as well as absorb it. But still, adults have always been plugged into broadcasting from other sources, such as news stations on TV, radio shows, or the newspaper itself, which are all not usually part of a kid's intake. Although news on social media is most popular within adolescents and young adults, social media news is on the rise in every generation. Anderson and Carlson state in their article, How Social Media is Reshaping News, that around 30% of the general U.S. population retrieves their news from Facebook, the leading social media site. About 10% receive their news from YouTube and 8% from Twitter. These seem to be pretty significant numbers, and I only expect them to grow as time progresses.
Thanks, Steve. Honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. I truly can say that personally, I am pretty dependent on social media, and I find myself checking my phone for notifications from the news app all the time. So in our second point, we really want to emphasize how news on social media is a social construction of technology and how it provokes an influential cycle by affecting its users as well as being impacted by its users. This social construction is also interpretively flexible in that different meanings are assigned to it by different groups. For example, the younger generation in our society considers social media news to be a legitimate and reliable source of worldly news, whereas the majority of adults might rather find it to be amateurish, illegitimate, and faulty. Different groups view this differently, which adds to its complexity as a social construction of technology.
A couple months ago, I got the chance to listen to Richard Stengel speak here at Princeton. If you guys don't know, Stengel is the managing editor of Time Magazine and Time.com. He's written several books and had a huge part in collaborating with Nelson Mandela on the best-selling autobiography Long Walk to Freedom. He's covered several presidential campaigns as a senior writer for Time as well. I asked him a couple questions, and it was really cool to listen to an expert and hear his opinions on the matter. So he basically just talked about fake news and its implementations and how to stay away from it or filter it out. He started off talking about how there is no barrier to entry on blogs online. They get millions of views, but there's no guarantee of quality or correctness of facts in these blogs. In a First Amendment system, truth and lies have to battle each other, and hopefully truth wins out, but it's the people who have to make the judgment. This brings us to the topic of media literacy. Media literacy is a gigantic problem in the United States and in the world. Credibility comes from aggregation, like the law of large numbers. We do see corporations working on this credibility problem. Google, for example, has code for search optimization. Their system puts stories which are not credible lower on their search menu. If a story is, say, 325 results down, it's probably not going to be true. Turning to social media, each person's Facebook feed is different based on interests, so there's customized content on every person's page and feed, but the general public thinks this is universal and that content and ads are the same for everyone, but they're not. There's a concept called filter bubbles. This is how internet users get less exposure to viewpoints conflicting theirs and don't see articles or news sources with ideas that they don't agree with. So everything they're reading supports how they feel, thus they think the whole world has the same opinions, or at least think that those opinions are the most popular. But on Facebook and similar sites, there's an algorithm to make ads and content different from person to person. And as we head into our next segment, we would love to welcome two guests to our show. These guys, for some reason, have some strong opinions on the matter. First, we have our good friend Alex Morgan Parkinson, a 20-year-old go-getter with aspirations to be a cowboy. This guy has traveled all the way from Forbes just to be with us today, so we thank him for that. And sitting right beside him, we have the big show himself, Eli Stern. He's ready to raise his voice and get sweaty with passion, and he's brought even stronger opinions than Alpa.
So we just have some questions for you guys today. What do you think, in your opinion, are some pros and cons to social media news?
I'd say a pro is just how easily accessible the news is, but I would say con is that there's no a guarantee that's going to be reliable.
I think, I think increasing just awareness and participation with news and political stories is a good thing. But like Alex said, not that it's not credible or that like fake news is out there, but that stuff is taken out of context. Like a lot of times you see a headline and it'll be a sound bit, and those are the most dangerous because like it's taken totally out of context. It can mean something completely different from what they're intended. So I think that's probably the biggest con.
So our second question for y'all revolves a lot around points discussed in Sam Sanders' article, Did Social Media Ruin Election 2016? Basically, we want to hear if you guys think news on social media, or just social media in general, played an influential role in the election, and if so, how?
For me, I don't think it played. It's hard to tell whether it played a very specific role, but I do think that it kind of diverted both sides, left and right, farther to each side, kind of because everyone's news feeds are all centered around the viewpoints that they want to hear, so that's just going to push them farther and farther into their corner. But that's really...
Yeah.
I think it did have a measurable effect on the outcome of the 2016 election in the sense that a lot of social media, almost all of social media, affects the millennial generation, and the millennial generation had a terrible showing to the polls, and I think it's because leading up to the election, the social media news and a lot of news sources in general predicted a landslide victory for Hillary Clinton, and that gave kind of a false sense of confidence to a lot of Democratic voters, and it prevented them from going out to the polls, or disincentivized them going out to the polls. They thought it was in the bag already, and I think that was dangerous to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Good points. Thanks, guys. So to wrap up with you guys, we just have one final question, and we want to know, in your opinion, do you think that news on social media will begin to overtake other news outlets, and should those other sources of news, like, should they feel threatened in terms of like their existence as the future progresses?
In my opinion, I don't think social media will overtake those more traditional news outlets. I think social media is pretty limited in the news that it can provide, whether that's 140 characters in a tweet or a Facebook post or whatever. Those are usually just headlines taken from those traditional news outlets or articles shared. So I think that those news outlets are already branching out onto social media, so I don't think they'll overtake them.
Yeah, just going off that too, I think social media news is probably at its maximum right now, and everything we see on social media is opinionated. Like we don't see facts just how they are, and I think increasingly people are aware of this point, and those who care about it go to more legitimate sources. And I think print journalism is in danger, but I don't think legitimate journalism, if they continue to move online and in more digestible forms, is in trouble. There's a lot of really legitimate journalism online that people love and people read, so I don't think they're in trouble.
Definitely. I think it's easy to say that, this social construction is not fixed by any means. So a huge thank you to both Alex and Eli for joining us this morning. In wrapping up, I hope you were able to take away something from our segment about news on social media.
Yeah, guys, we really wanted to highlight how this social construction of technology is prevalent in our culture, is constantly developing, changing, and growing as social media outlets shape their sites, and we wanted to point out the positives and negatives of this construction.
We hope y'all took away as much as we learned through researching this topic and noticed how your own tendencies may be influenced by social media news. Again, thanks for tuning in on Good Morning Princeton. That's all for now, folks.
There's a conclusion.